My memory drags me back, again and again, to the blistering white walls of the church hall in Vila Formosa. São Paulo sunshine leached through the frosted windows, bright as a slap. The folding chairs scraped against the tile as people shifted, fidgeting, nervous, excited. I stood at the front, hands folded so tightly my knuckles lost color. I was 22, recently graduated, and clutching an impossible hope. Pastor Joaquim wore the dark suit he reserved for weddings and funerals. He addressed the room as if delivering a benediction, but his eyes didn't meet mine. My mother sat in the front row. I could feel her tension, could almost smell the salt and starch of her clean shirt, the way she'd ironed her hope for me that morning and now saw it crumpling. Aunt Mertz had already spoken, voice sharp as vinegar. Filmmaking. Isso é cute trabalho, why not a real job, Pedro? Law, medicine, even accounting. Cousin Raphael laughed, his sneakers tapping the chair leg. Cameras don't pay rent, primo. My uncle, big hands folded on his belly, shook his head. No one here worked so you could play at Gringo Dreams. This is Brazil, son. Grief balled under my ribs, suffocating. I tried to explain how stories mattered, how cinema could carve out new space for truth, but the words stuck. My Portuguese twisted around foreign concepts, film school jargon that sounded pretentious in that room, independent cinema, festival circuit, social narratives. My arguments evaporated under the fluorescent lighting. Pastor Joaquim cleared his throat. Pedro, we only want the best for you. Perhaps it's time to be realistic. Your father, his glance searched for my father's picture framed beside the altar, was a man of steady work. He built things. Everyone watched me, waiting for me to give in. My mother's fingertips worried her rosary. I wanted to apologize, to rewind my life and erase all the scenes that led me here. Instead, the words surprised me. I have to try. If I don't, I'll never know who I am. Aunt Mertz scoffed. Who you are is someone who'll come crawling home asking for help. Their laughter stuck to me, heavy as the São Paulo humidity. When I met their eyes, I felt suddenly transparent, as if my body were nothing but a bad idea passing through the room. Afterward, while people sorted chairs and ate brigadeiros, my mother squeezed my arm. She whispered, "They don't want to see you suffer, Philho." Her voice wavered, but her eyes were clear. We stood side by side, two silhouettes against the church's colored windows, her love pressing against my need to become someone else. I moved out 3 weeks later, to a crumbling apartment near Bike-Siga where I sublet a room with two other dreamers. Marcella played in a samba band, Lucas designed cheap web pages for local dentists. The air was thick with sweat, basil, and the constant rumble of Avenida Paulista. Cockroaches flickered in the corners. My bed was a mat on the floor. It felt like freedom. I found work filming weddings. Blurry footage of grandmothers weeping and little girls spinning in rented lace. I edited 15-minute montages set to Ed Sheeran, grateful for every paycheck and every meal of arroz e feijão. When I wasn't filming, I wrote scripts at the kitchen table, cursing the sputtering Wi-Fi and the neighbor's newborn wails. My ideas were too big for the broken lamplight and bargain instant coffee, but I clung to them until my fists shook. Most weeks I called my mother. She tried to sound supportive. "When will we see your name, Pedro? Is it safe out there by yourself?" Once late at night she confessed, "Your uncle says you're still wandering. Tell me you're not hungry." "I'm not hungry, me." But I was, for food, for recognition, for proof that I wasn't just another fool with a camera. There were years when the city tried to swallow me, my savings bled away. A short documentary, filmed with borrowed gear and friends working for free, was rejected from 7 festivals in a row. My rent slipped late, and I took a gig translating English subtitles for cheesy soap operas, ashamed. Sometimes, alone with my battered camera, I wondered if the family was right, if ambition was another name for hunger. In those months, I carried grief quietly, grief for my father, for my childhood, for the version of myself who could have worked at a bank and been done with it. But I also found a strange, sharp clarity. Each rejection letter bruised, but it peeled away something soft and fearful inside me. The city's noise and grind were an education. I learned how to talk to people who had nothing, how to shoot on little sleep, how to listen. Then, on the margins, real stories emerged. I met Yara, who worked the night shift at a bakery and smuggled leftover pão de queijo for kids on the street. She let me film her secret deliveries. I filmed Lucas's samba rehearsals, old musicians patching instruments with duct tape and dreams. Marcella's uncle was a doorman who wrote amorous poetry for lost tenants. I captured him in shadows, his hopes set to the pulse of the city. Together we built something, a web of small, honest films, none particularly polished but each one stubborn and true. One night 2 years after the church hall debacle, I uploaded my short, Noise, Acqui, 5 minutes of everyday survival, the panettone vendor, the tired nurse, the lovers in a borrowed room. I edited until dawn, sent the file to 3 festivals and collapsed. I told nobody. A month later in April my email pinged, selected for Mostra de Cinema Independent Paulista. I read the message 5 times, afraid to blink. That first screening in a low-ceilinged theatre near Republica, 30 people watched my film, 5 were friends, 3 were lost, and the rest I could never place. When the credits rolled, there was a little applause, soft but real. A woman with silver braids hugged me and said, "You made me remember when life hurt less." I went home walking on air. Still, São Paulo is not a city for fairy tales. I worked more overtime. My films played here and there, small festivals, YouTube channels, a segment on local TV. The money was slight, barely enough to splurge on a bottle of decent wine, but people watched. A teenager from Recife messaged me on Instagram, "Your movie made me want to try." By the time I was 30, the family had grown quieter. At weddings or festas, my relatives asked about that camera thing with polite boredom. I felt less like a punchline, more like a distant cousin who collected spoons. Then, last winter, everything shifted. I was editing a film based on the bakery worker Yara's story, Dos Noite. A French producer in town for Festival do Inverno saw a clip on Instagram and messaged me for a meeting. I was sure it was a scam, but he arrived polite, sunburned, eager. He bought the rights, there was a contract. Suddenly I had a budget 4 times my annual income. We shot new scenes, were reviewed by O Globo and astonishingly won the Premio Revelaço. Suddenly, strangers recognized my face on Paulista, smiling as if I belonged to the architecture of the city. My Instagram filled with invitations. There were meetings with PR people, toast with butter and coffee poured strong and sweet. I bought my mother a washing machine. My uncle watched my interview on TV Cultura, and then the call came. Pastor Joaquim, ever formal, invited me back to the church hall in Vila Formosa. To speak, share your success with the young people, he said. Your story is encouraging, we're proud. The words strung strange and unfamiliar. I called my mother, she sniffed. You see, I told you, they'll act as if they believed in you from the beginning. Wear your blue shirt, Pedro. On Saturday, I took the metro to Vila Formosa, documentary camera in my bag, a habit I couldn't shake. The old streets pressed at the edges of memory. I bought a packet of coconut candy from Dona Helena, who'd sold the same sweets since I was a child. She kissed my cheek. Fame suits you. The church hall was bright again, scrubbed clean, the same wobbly folding chairs. The crowd was bigger than I remembered. I didn't recognize half the faces, kids in soccer jerseys, women wiping baby mouths, old men thumbing dog-eared Bibles. But there in the front were my mother and Aunt Mertz, flanked by 2 of her sisters like guardian statues. Uncle Paulo nodded in my direction, gruff. Pastor Joaquim greeted me at the door. Your film was excellent, Pedro. Even my wife cried, we don't always understand each other, but you have a gift. He led me up front where the fluorescent light was less harsh this time. From the small stage, I spoke plainly. Not about fame or money, but about long nights alone, cheap coffee, rejection, the ache of doubt. I told them how Yara's story shaped me, how São Paulo's relentless pulse taught me to see beauty where others saw failure. My hands stopped shaking after a few minutes. At Pastor Joaquim's signal, an assistant wheeled out a projector and pulled down a canvas screen against the altar. They played Dos Noite in its entirety. For half an hour the room quieted, the fussy infants, the distracted teens, even Aunt Mertz. I watched from the back as the images, crisp now, vibrant, glinted on those same blank walls. Yara pushing a bakery cart down empty streets at dawn, her hand reaching for a boy's flickering smile, the slow, silent offering of bread, Marcel's shadow dancing across peeling paint. When the credits rolled, my name shimmered in white. For a single, electric moment I was suspended between grief for all those years spent doubting, and clarity, sudden and pure. I had made something that reached across the gulf. Silence, then applause, unsteady at first, fueled by those who recognized their own struggles on screen. Then someone, my mother, stood clapping, tears streaming, pride and loss warring across her face. I thought I would break. Aunt Mertz, dry-eyed, stood reluctantly. It was moving, she finally said, soft enough for only me. It's not the work I imagined, but perhaps it's work that matters. Cousin Raphael, taller now, bruised by life but less cruel, stuck out a hand. You surprised us, Primo, you really did it. After the showing, the kids asked questions about cameras, about Yara, about how to get their stories told. One girl wanted to know how I kept going when money ran out. You find reasons every day, I said, even when you can't see them yet. I hugged my mother for a long time. There was a tremor in my chest, the old ache, and something healing over it. She whispered, "You gave them something beautiful, Pedro. Not everyone can do that." The old hurt didn't disappear, but it felt lighter. I didn't seek revenge or loud victory. I just wanted to sit with my family while sunlight slanted through the dirty windows, and for once, none of us had to pretend. Later, as dusk settled thick and golden over Villa Formosa, I walked through the streets I thought I'd outgrown. People called my name, sometimes shyly, sometimes loudly. The boulangerie girl, the grocer, the woman with 3 fierce daughters. Every face was familiar and strange. So much of my life had been shaped by rejection, by the fear of being ridiculous. But now, as I carried my battered camera home, sweat trickling down my neck, I could feel the city pulsing through my veins, messy, loud, impossible, breathtaking. I realized with clarity as bright as São Paulo's morning sun, I'd returned not as the boy who was shamed in a church hall, but as a man who'd learned to carve meaning from loss. My story was theirs and ours and enough.